Hi, welcome back to Jedbanger's Ball. This is your host, Jed Mayhew. Today I'm excited to have my good buddy Stephen Brower on the show. We met in a practice space in Silver Lake, ended up having some adventures together. We're going to get into that on the show. I don't want to bore you with that information right now. But check him out. He's doing good stuff. I got to get going here. I got to go down to the Mediterranean sandwich shop where I work. That's my life. That's going on with me. I'm doing a podcast and I'm going to make sandwiches for some people here in LA. So let's talk to Stephen so I can get to work. What is it's a Grateful Dead book of photography, or what is that?
I think that's what that is. I'm going to the shows. I'm going to the Chicago thing.
You're going to go for all three shows?
I'm going for 2 of the 3 shows.
What dates are you going?
I'm going for the Friday and the Saturday, the 2nd and the 3rd. And I would normally, I don't know if I would have normally gone. I mean, I'm a fan of certain points of the career of the Dead, but my friend Phil, who has a black cloud just over his life in general, I feel like he wrote in for tickets, and then he went on StubHub, and he's just been sort of frantically trying to get tickets. And he's from Chicago, and he loves the Grateful Dead, and he fucking loves Fish, which Trey Anastasio is part of this thing too. Sure. And he loves like America and July 4th. So like if you wrote down on a piece of paper like what is Phil, you would be like Chicago, Grateful Dead, July 4th. Like that's him. And so when they announced this thing, he was like, and he had been just like turned away at every pass. And then also like he's been shit with his job and his relationships. And then I know like this manager that I work with, who's like, hey man, I can get you tickets if you want. And I was like, and now Phil's like actually maybe not going to live in LA anymore. So I was like, I have to do this to like, for the sun to come out over his life. So we got the confirmation, and he's like, we booked the tickets and the whole thing. So Phil and I are going to go to Chicago and stay with, I think, his college roommate or something, and we're going to go to these Grateful Dead shows, and we'll see how it goes.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, though, that's interesting about you and sort of our relationship is you're kind of this, like, key to unlocking things like that.
I would like to think of myself as a key. I've never been described as a key.
Well, I don't know if you're the key or the hole, but there's something that's getting unlocked involving you.
Okay.
And that's kind of how we sort of met. I mean, the way we met was that I moved into your practice space, basically, with my band. And you had a band in there.
Right, that's right.
But we sort of, kind of...
By definition, you're never there at the same time.
Exactly. 2 ships passing in the night, or in the little parking lot there. And so we never really had talked outside of just like, hey, what's up, man? I'm going to move your amp. Cool. You guys playing any shows? Or where are you guys playing? Oh, yeah, we're playing. Oh, we played there. It sucks. You know, blah, blah. Mostly that kind of stuff. And then I was working on a film with my friend Calvin, who's on episode, I think, 3 of the podcast. We had him on here as well. And we talk about you in that podcast because...
I'll have to listen to that one.
You listen to that one because you're mentioned in it. If you're going to listen to any of them, listen to the one that you're mentioned in. Because, so I was working on a film helping him, and I don't remember if he asked me to do it or if I just volunteered to do it or whatever, but it was helping him track down a song for the film in the role of music supervisor. And it was a song called Red Bird by an artist named Terry Allen.
Yes, it was.
and I was having a hell of a time tracking it down or figuring out who owned the rights to it, the publishing, etc. And, we talked about this in the last episode too, the music supervision episode, where it's like a lot of times the people you're talking to don't really. It's like an office job for them.
Right. A lot of people are just playing defense. They get, like, especially Fred, the guy who I think you had originally dealt with on our side, who was handling that at Vanguard, which is the label I primarily work for, you have 60-something years worth of recordings, and there's 9 million people in France that want to put a Joan Baez song on and so there's just this flood of paperwork, and it's very rare that you can, like, contextualize what the request is versus just like, what is this? This is another email or another fax that I have to deal with.
Right. So I was having a hell of a time trying to get this song cleared, and then I was leaving the practice space one night, and I saw you, and I said, just by chance, I said, hey, so what do you do, Stephen? Where do you work, or what do you do? You know, and you said, I work at Vanguard Records. And I said, Terry Allen's Vanguard Records? And you said, yeah, I produced his greatest hits or whatever. Yeah. And I was like, motherfucker, because, you know, I'd never really done this job before as a music supervisor, and it's like, I'm just helping my friend out, and, you know, basically he found the one guy, me, that actually would be able to get this song, and I found the one guy, you, that would actually be able to help me get this song in just a completely random, nothing sort of situation.
And probably, honestly, the one guy, to add one more layer of sort of serendipity to that, Terry Allen, I'm a huge Terry Allen fan, and I think he's an absolute genius. I don't use the term genius like sort of loosely. I think there are a finite number of them, and I think he is definitely one. And so, you know, worked with him for a while and produced this compilation, and Redbird is on the compilation, and he's, of the artists that I work with of that era, of like the sort of older kind of legacy artists, probably one of very few of them that I could have then turned around and said, no, for sure, dude, I can totally call him now and just be like, dude, it's cool, these are good dudes, and like not have it be easy, and like that's sort of what happened,
right?
You know?
And yeah, and just to touch on Terry Allen real quick, just for those that don't know, I mean, if you were to describe any sort of country music performer, singer, songwriter as an artist, he's probably...
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, he's primarily a visual artist.
Exactly,
like
that's what I mean.
Right.
In the most general sense of it, you know.
But then he also, like, he gets lumped into this, and like, you know, sort of for geographic and chronological reasons, he gets lumped into this like West Texas scene that was like this band, the Flatlanders, and Butch Hancock and Jimmy Dale Gilmore and Joe Ely, and this like Lubbock scene. And Terry Allen is like the total like sideways kind of Tom Waits' Bizarro World version of all that, which is, to me, sort of infinitely more interesting. I just always responded to it. And he writes these, like, he has this record, Juarez, which is this, like, concept record, this sort of, like, Bonnie and Clyde concept record kind of
It's
thing.
amazing,
Yeah.
and it's a complete standout as far as what most people consider country music or whatever.
Totally. And so, yeah, I've just always been, I felt a real Terry Allen geekdom.
Well, where are you from originally? Because you're from sort of a different part of the world than most people that are on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm from North Carolina. I've lived in Los Angeles for 13 years. But, yeah, I grew up in North Carolina and moved. I was working at Sugar Hill Records as, like, sort of an intern, and then kind of like a glorified intern, and I was doing some, like, compilations of, like, bluegrass sort of. After Oh Brother hit, there was this like rush to like flood the market with bluegrass, which worked for a while.
Right, and you and Mumford and Sons.
Yeah, it's like, so we like
saw the same
we
opportunity.
Totally. So I made these like bluegrass compilations as part of this series. And anyway, I thought I was going to stay working in Durham, where the office was at the time, and then the job that I was going to have like dissipated, and my buddy Jacob, who I had made films with in college and stuff, was like, "Hey, I'm going to LA," and so, do you want to go? And so we went and saw Hank Williams Jr. and then got off the next morning and drove to LA.
You're gonna love the end of the show if you mention Hank Williams Jr. now. But so did you come out here to do film stuff then?
Well,
mostly,
I came
right?
out here with like, I didn't really know. I knew like 2 people, and both of them sort of factor prominently in the rest of my LA story. Is I had a professor in college who was young. She wasn't that much older than me. She was like an adjunct professor or whatever. And she had worked out here briefly for Bonafide Productions. These guys, Albert Berger and Ron Yerxa, and she was like, "Oh, well, if you're going to go to L.A., you should call this one guy. You should call Ron Yerxa." And then I knew Fred Jasper, the guy who you had originally tried to get to Terry Allen.
Right.
Because he's the only guy that had worked in the Durham Sugar Hill office that had moved out here to work at the parent company. So those are the two people that I knew, other than the guy I was moving with. And so we get here, and I email Ron Yerxa, and I go meet with him, and he says, "Oh, yeah, you want to be an intern here?" And I said, "Sure." So I started interning at Bonafide, and the first, I was writing script coverage because I had sort of a film studies background, and the first script I ever wrote coverage on was Little Miss Sunshine.
Really?
Which I think at the time I wrote that I didn't think it was very good.
What does script coverage mean?
Well, script coverage is like, so all these producers get like, all these scripts that are sent from the various agencies or whatever, and rather than read all of the scripts, the producers will have staffers read the scripts and sort of summarize them, both from a plot standpoint and like, all right, what is this trying to accomplish? Is it marketable or whatever? Do you recommend that we take this one seriously? And then it sort of gets kicked up the chain or whatever. And that one, I think they had already were working on, and they were just like, here's a practice one.
Or they were testing you
maybe
to see if you were good at script coverage.
So I wrote that the script I thought was pretty shitty, and it later won an Oscar for best original screenplay. So you're not doing script coverage. So I was bad at that job. But meanwhile, Fred, the other guy that I knew, my boss, my now boss, like there was a girl that was an assistant in like the marketing department at Vanguard Records, and Vanguard and Sugar Hill are sister labels, so Fred was working in that office, and he literally was overhearing this girl getting fired, and he was like, "Hey, this girl's getting fired. You should like just show up tomorrow with your resume."
Right, that's a good friend.
So I did, and my now boss was like, "Are you the kid that was in Durham, like making the bluegrass compilations?" And I was like, "Yep, that's me." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, you're in."
You know, that's every time I've ever gotten a job or gotten somebody else a job, it's totally like just because someone else had just gotten fired. And it's not that you're so great or anything. They just really needed somebody like immediately.
Yeah, I just showed up, and they were like, "Yeah, you do the work." With
your CDRs and your compilations, your mixtapes.
So, yeah, that's how I got here.
Were you in North Carolina? You were back. Is that where like David Gordon Green and those guys got their start down there? Were you going to the same school as those guys?
Those dudes. Some of those dudes went. David Gordon Green went to School of the Arts, and like he definitely knew. I know people that knew. There was like a generation maybe older than me that was like David Gordon Green and Peyton Reed, and there was like and then all the dudes who did King of the Hill. And so like that was like kind of a crew of North Carolina filmmakers. I went to school with like there was like I was in part of this sort of Chapel Hill music sort of film scene. Like when I was there around like the Triangle, it was kind of like the alt country boom, like Whiskey Town and Ryan Adams. Like that was all happening. And then a bunch of other great bands that nobody's ever heard of, and then Tiff Merritt like was at college at the same time I was in college with her, and like so it was sort of the scene we would go to show. And then I had a little band and we would play. It was sort of like an alt country band. The Drive-By Truckers guys we got to know really well because that was all part of that scene. And then like half of those people made movies and half of them were in bands, and some people did both, and that was kind of the crew. Gotcha.
So then you get out here and you get the job at Vanguard, and what's your job there then?
So I was just sort of like I was the marketing department assistant, and we were distributed ourselves at the time, which mostly meant that I dealt with like retail. But what was awesome about that was that every week we would have these meetings, and it was just my job to like do the notes for the meeting. And so I very quickly figured out what everybody did, because like the radio people would be like, "This is what we're doing," and then the like publicity people would be like, "This is what we did this week." And so I would sort of see how all the pieces fit together. And then sort of whatever at the end of I sort of just picked I just picked all the things that I liked, and I was like, I go to record stores, so can I call on the indie record stores? And I have a film background, so can I be in charge of our music videos? And like I go see more bands than most of the other people here, so can I be in charge of like finding new bands that aren't like already established artists? And so they kind of just kept letting me do that stuff, and that's sort of what I did for a long time.
Well, because I think of Vanguard as sort of like a catalog label in a sense, in that you have a lot of like kind of older artists,
Right.
that have extensive careers and catalogs and things like that. I mean, can you talk a little bit about like what sort of Vanguard is all about?
Yeah, I mean, so Vanguard, definitely, yeah. It's sort of the legacy of Vanguard is classic, like sort of folk blues, Doc Watson, Joan Baez, Buddy Guy, like Mississippi John Hurt, John Fahey, all this incredible stuff. Then sort of more, and like a bunch of weirdo stuff too, that like, so you remember the hits, but then there's like, they definitely chase some trends along the way, and they're like, well, there's these weird disco records or whatever.
I mean, I think that's when did the label start? I mean,
so the label started in 1960.
Yeah, so I think in the 60s and 70s with some of these record labels, they had Led Zeppelin on there, and then they also would have just like a really weird like Tropicana, bluesy,
Right.
Hawaiian, whatever the kind of trend.
Oh yeah,
at the
I mean,
time
and that was like I produced this comp a couple of years ago with this guy Dave Katznelson, and the whole comp,
Love Dave Katznelson.
Yeah, so that comp, Dave and I did this comp, and it was like after Vanguard had a hit, like Country Joe and the Fish was like a hit, right? And so they were like, oh, let's sign all the there's other bands like this in San Francisco. Let's put out singles of all them, and they're mostly terrible, but like there'll be like a song, or whatever. And so we signed the comp is like the like chase.
Well, the idea is that if Country Joe sells 500,000 copies, that if his buddy's band
Right.
sells 10% of that,
Then
and then we still sold 50,000 records, and we didn't have to invest too much money, and that guy came along and was just like, we gave him some weed, and like
Right.
he was totally stoked on that just to be there.
Dude, believe me, I've seen some of those deals. Like, do we still own this? Can we put this out? And I'm like, holy shit, that's the deal. All right, $300 on a plane ticket to New York. All right, like,
Those are
whatever.
some of the old deals that they had.
Or like, there's this. So we did this record with that Light in the Attic actually reissued with this guy Bob Frank. That's this like Memphis stoner folk kind of like J.J. Cale-y kind of record, and that. Like, and Bob Frank's still around, and I'm like researching whether or not we can license this to Light in the Attic to put out. And like, Bob Frank was actually never signed to Vanguard. It was like he was signed to a production company who had like an imprint deal or whatever. And then I'm like, oh well, looks like that the production company made a really shitty deal with you. Like, and our deal was with them. Like, I don't know. It's just like researching all that stuff is like, holy shit. Like,
I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, just to think of how they used to run these record labels compared to now, and now every like fucking guy with band or whatever comes in with like the LegalZoom.com
Right.
website queued up, and they're just like, man, got this thing here, whereas
what
like,
about my returns reserves? Yeah, like,
I'm not
yeah.
selling my publishing. Well, that's, what, no one gives a shit about your songs anyways, but cool. Hang on to your publishing, dude. Everyone walking around, I'm not selling my publishing.
Right.
Like, okay, great. Don't sell it. That's fine. No one will ever buy it anyways, so don't worry about selling it.
Totally.
But you see these things back in the day, and a lot of like, you read about like soul musicians or R&B musicians or whatever, and they would walk in and they'd be like, where are my royalties at or whatever, and the guy would be like, well, there's this Cadillac parked out here, and we can.
Oh, that's the famous Sun Records.
Yeah, we can talk about that, or we can go for a drive, or whatever. And the guy's like, all right, well, I need a car, so.
Well, that was like when we worked with Levon. So that sort of fast forward to Vanguard kind of 2.0, which is like Vanguard kind of currently, as it's consisted, sort of constituted and has been for a while, is sort of like half really kind of established iconic artists who we work with, John Fogerty, and until he passed away, Levon Helm, and Merle Haggard we worked with for a while, and artists like that, and then sort of developing sort of more mainstream kind of like pop singer-songwriters.
Right, because what we're talking about is like a very antiquated kind of idea of the record label. So how does Vanguard, navigate those waters these days between these old? I mean, some of these guys probably have like expectations of the way things used to be, or are used to working a certain way.
Well, I feel like, and this is where, so with Vanguard particularly, I think it's kind of like, I think the dynamic between the record label and the artist has definitely evolved over the years, and particularly with the kinds of artists that we work with on Vanguard, where maybe, say this artist comes in and they have a relatively established fan base, or we're deciding to work with, say, John Fogerty on his new project, right? So, John Fogerty has his own sort of infrastructure that is sort of a machine of touring and merchandise and fan club or whatever it is. And then there's this new...
Baseball gloves.
Right, baseball gloves.
Right.
And then there's this new material, and we are kind of like a marketing services, relationship. Like, all right, we're going to market the album, which then in turn is going to help your touring and your merchandise and whatever. And it's less the like, antiquated, like, well, here's your record deal. Like, we're gonna make you a star, kid. Like, there's very little of that in what I do.
Right, and that's what I was wondering, because I know that to survive, I mean that doesn't exactly exist anymore, because these labels they're not putting out a bunch of money at the beginning and then as an investment and waiting on that return.
Right, it's a lot more. Yeah, it's just more like in a lot of situations, especially with these stuff, it's a real marketing relationship.
It's more branding.
Yeah, it's a total like brand development. It's brand and that said, so then I have like a year and a half ago I started my own imprint.
Right.
Which I think in my brain and hopefully in reality at some point is very much more tethered to the idea, because I'm a sort of historically and currently I shop labels, like,
right.
I know you guys, Zigs are on In the Red, and like I buy a lot of just In the Red records that like I don't even know,
Sure, and when I used to work at Sub Pop and I talked to people that were a little bit older than me, and when they've kind of first heard about Sub Pop in the late 80s and early 90s and stuff like that, basically the deal was like, if you went to the record store and you saw the Sub Pop logo on the record, you would just buy that record without hearing the band at all, because you knew it was good, or you knew you were going to like it, or it was...
Well, and that was part of this, right? You had I remember seeing the, like, hanging diorama, the Sub Pop sold here in right. record stores or whatever, and I buy that, like... I know the Intelligence, who I know is like your friend Lars. Like, I found that record totally as just like, well, this is on In the Red, and I'm going to buy it.
It's Lars' birthday today, by the way.
Well,
awesome. Happy birthday, Lars.
Happy birthday, Lars. And that's a band that I found entirely by just buying it from In the Red, because it's on In the Red, and I was on the website, and I was buying something else or whatever.
Totally.
And then became one of my favorite bands.
Right. So let's talk about that, though. So your company that you started, the imprint that you started at Vanguard that you're running, is called Easy Sound Recordings.
Right. And now it's technically separate. It's totally separate from Vanguard, but it was started as sort of like an imprint under Vanguard. But or just sort of not necessarily under Vanguard, but through the same, parent company. But now, so yeah, and basically that point was over the years, there were things that didn't fit our sort of the aesthetic of Vanguard or what have you, or maybe just like wasn't our like Vanguard wasn't marketing a label identity necessarily. It was more like I say, it was like artist service and marketing relationships with these other kinds of artists. And I don't know, there was just an opportunity where several bands that I was familiar with and really liked, there was an opportunity to form this new thing and to have it sort of from the outset, hopefully be something where I was super stoked, even though it was small, to see like very early on that we were like people that like on our website, you could just tell like these people just bought everything we put up on the website. And there was this one guy in Seattle, he was like the first guy, and like Terry, my partner in the label, was like, holy shit, this dude has just bought. He just, every time we put it up, he's like the first guy to order. And so that was the thing. That's why I wanted to craft this sort of label identity of like, yeah, if it's on Easy Sound, if I see the Easy Sound logo, like I sort of know what it's going to sound like, and I also sort of know it's going to be good.
I mean, was it hard to go into like your bosses and convince them to let you do something like this?
Well, basically, because my boss, to his credit, was always, I mean, he digs these kind of bands, and I think he was sort of also kind of frustrated that there wasn't like a lane with either Vanguard or Sugar Hill to like work with Vetiver or bands like that. Like, he's like, fuck, I love Vetiver, and so there was just this sort of serendipitous moment where a lot of these guys were either out of their deals or working on records, and they sort of came to me in various ways of like, oh, the Donkeys are making a record, and then Devendra, who I'm friendly with, Devendra Banhart, he's like, oh, this guy Rodrigo, I had just seen him open for Devendra. He was like, oh, he's actually making a record. It's really great. And so all these things happened at the exact same time, and I just took a step back and I was like, wait a minute, this is a thing. And went to my boss and said, listen, this is not like let's start a label and start trying to sign bands. Like, here's 6 records that I know. It was easy for me to like put a business plan together and say,
right,
we can release these 6 records this year, and like announce them all at the same time, and like sort of from the outset have a kind of label, sort of like raison d'etre, like this is what we're trying to do here, you know.
Well, what's interesting just to me and sort of our relationship is like I worked with a lot of these bands 10 years ago at Sub Pop or so, Fruit Bats, Vetiver, Howlin' Rain, which Ethan was in Comments on Fire back then. So I've worked with all of these people, and then, you know, you think of like sort of these trends in music, and these people at one point were signed to like another record label, and then for whatever reason they're not on Sub Pop anymore, and they're looking to work with someone else, and they end up working with you, and then it's like I just saw Fruit Bats are going on tour with
My Morning Jacket.
Yeah, which is huge for them, and I don't know if they ever went on a tour that big before.
Vetiver's going out with Wilco, and like
exactly
Rodriguez
that was the other
with
one I was saw.
Yeah, like.
And it's like it kind of made me think about it the other day when I read that. It's like it doesn't really matter, you know, how much fucking press you get at one point if you keep doing it, you know, like, and you're good, which these guys obviously are, but not all these. Some of these guys suck, but they don't. And then, you know, these opportunities can come up. And so was this, I want to know what your relationship with these bands was and why you decided to work with them and how working with them sort of got them going to do all this other stuff that they're doing right now.
Well, it's what's weird is that the kind of I think the spoke of the wheel. I don't think I would know any of these bands if I did another sort of first thing of like, let me see if they're gonna fucking let me do this thing at Vanguard.
Sure.
Was I produced this John Fahey tribute record in 2004, I think, and it was like right before this sort of like neo folk kind of thing really happened. So, but Devendra had put out his first record with Young God, and like some of that stuff was starting to happen. And I was into that stuff, and I knew that Vanguard had this guy in the catalog, John Fahey, and it was sort of definitely a like real figurehead to this scene. And
I remember seeing those bands. I mean, I saw Devendra play in front of like 15 people sitting down at like a weird church near my house. And when I started to become aware of a lot of those bands that were doing that at a time, definitely like John Fahey's name started popping up everywhere, you know.
And that's exactly what, and like I heard like the M. Ward put out this Transfiguration of Vincent record on Merge, which the title of the record is a John Fahey reference, and then he like referenced, there was like an interview I read, and I was like, I think this is a thing. But it was right at this point before, like, none of these dudes had managers or, like, real labels. I mean, M. Ward was on Merge, but they were all... It was just so easy to be like, hey, dudes, I got my boss to give us some money to make a John Fahey record, and it just happened very easily. And I just dealt directly with... I got to know Devendra, and I got to know Eric, because Fruit Bats are on it. It was right when Mouthfuls came out on Sub Pop.
And Devendra was on Michael Gira from the Swans, like, personal record label,
Young
basically.
God, and that's who I got. I just emailed Michael Gira. I just just ran. I was just sort of like, let me email mgira at younggod.com. He was like, sure, I'm great. Devendra would love it. Here's his cell phone or whatever. And like that's how it all happened. And like Sufjan Stevens is on in Calexico, and it was just like right before all these people kind of had their moment. Anyway, so we made that record, and then I just stayed friends with Eric and Devendra and all these people over the years, and then that's how I got to know Andy, and then through Rodrigo, and so, you know, and then Eric throws this festival called Huachica up in Sonoma, and I went there a couple years ago, and I was just like, and a lot of these bands, the Donkeys were playing, and Vetiver was playing, and I was just kind of like, well, I just want this as a thing. This is a record label. Like, this is a group of people who are collaborative and sort of share an aesthetic, and we're all kind of record geeks in the same way. We all like geek out on the same like records that not that many people have probably. And then so it just became I think the Donkeys had sent me a record that they were making, and I was like, I don't know, dudes, I don't think this is going to work on Vanguard. And then same thing it was happening with Howlin' Rain, and then I talked to Eric, and I was like, is it totally crazy for us to just do this as a thing, like as its own thing? And he was like, well, maybe, but it just became really apparent that like, oh, all these people are going to have records, and all of these people already know each. So
they're all friends too. I mean,
and we didn't have a name for the label. Like that group of artists, like name the label. It was just like an email trail of like, what should we call this? And then it was like, what should the logo be? And so like, it wasn't like I started a label. It's called Easy Sound. Here's a record deal, kid. It was like, let's do this thing. And everybody, and so I feel like it has this real kind of like raw go team kind of, you know, sort of thing behind it because everybody was just there at the beginning, you know.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the Huachica Festival, which is what Eric from the Fruit Bats sort of puts on, or curates it, I guess.
Right. I think he maybe does less of the curation now, but yeah, he's still definitely involved. It's this weekend. But.
Right, this weekend. And then the other one that kind of, I guess maybe you would call it a sister festival, I don't fucking know, but is the Pickathon up in Clackamas, Oregon.
Right.
Where I'm from.
Well, so Pickathon...
Which I can't even fucking believe that
right.
anybody's doing anything there because I lived in a trailer park there and I used to hitchhike down the highway so I could play Spy Hunter.
Dude, Clackamas is real life. Like, so yeah, Terry Groves...
real life stories of Clackamas.
Terry Groves, who is a partner in the Pickathon Festival and does a lot of the booking, So when the same thing, when all this was happening, like, I was like, somebody's going to have to, like, run this, like, or help me run this. And then Eric from Fruit Bats was like, you should call Terry. And I didn't know Terry, but then all the bands knew him. He was sort of just like, and so he and I kind of run the deal. And then we've started this series where we've started putting out archives of Pickathon. We did one with Ty and King Tough, and like we have
That's
some
the
more.
first one, right?
That was the second one. We did Those Darlings Diarrhea Planet on Record Store Day, and then in May the Ty King Tough one came out, and so we're gonna do a series of sort of like limited Pickathon archive releases, just because it's sort of a sister festival to the label.
Well, yeah, and a lot of this kind of crossover music as far as bands and stuff go. When's the Pickathon Festival?
So the Pickathon Festival is the last weekend in July, first weekend of August. So I think it's like July 31st to August 2nd or whatever that weekend is.
That's great. So the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, you mentioned Levon Helm earlier,
yes.
working with him at Vanguard.
Yes.
And, you know, sort of famous... everyone should know the story of the band or the Last Waltz or whatever it is, you know, the mythos of this band. But you made a documentary.
Yeah, so my buddy Jacob, the guy who I moved out here with, he came out here to go to USC Film School. We made a bunch of movies together when he was in film school and lived together, and then subsequently, he did some music videos. I hired him to do some music videos. And then, like, when we put out what was Levon's, like, comeback record called Dirt Farmer, Levon was like, well, I kind of want to do a video, but I kind of want to do, like, a short film with a couple of the songs, because Levon being an actor, and he's in The Right Stuff and Coal Miner's Daughter, and all that. He's a performer, you know. And so Jake wrote, I got my buddy Jay, I was like, dude, do you want to, like, write something about, like, based on this record? So we made this, like, short film called Only Halfway Home, which is kind of this like weird little like bank robbery kind of like narrative that weaves in some of the songs, and that was just like a 25-minute thing that was used as like a marketing tool for the record. But Jake comes back from the shoot from that, and he was like, well, I kind of left the camera running most of the time, and I think there's like more to this than just like the promo video. And so we actually went and met with Bonafide as they come back into the story. I went to meet with Albert and Ron, and I was like, is this a thing? And it's just like Levon telling stories about catfish and like smoking weed and, you know, whatever, and like around the kitchen table. And they're like, this is incredible access, you know. And so we thought, Jake's like, awesome, I'm going to go back up there for 6 more weeks, and I'm going to come back and we're going to have a movie. And he was there for 3 years.
Right.
And so it was a long, but at the end of the day, and then so along the way, a lot happened with Levon. He got sick again. He won a Grammy, but he didn't go to the Grammys. His daughter had a baby. It was his first grandchild. It was just a lot of stuff happened in his life that we happened to sort of be there for. And so it's a rock and roll movie that from a very famous person that has a huge long history, but there's not really a lot of archival footage, and there's not actually that much music in it. It's really storytelling and
sure. And I mean, I've seen the movie and it's great, and it's a brutal story, and it has been from almost the beginning with that band, you know, and it continues on. And he had like a famous thing where he had like a a jam session at his house or whatever.
Right, the rambles, the midnight ramble.
Did you ever get to go to those? Or?
I did, and it's like I went to a couple, and it was pretty incredible because you're just sitting in his like house, which is also like basically
like a barn, right?
Well, yeah, it's like this big wooden sort of A-frame house barn. They call it the barn. It's not really a barn, but it's he records there, and so like the like living space of his house is like his live room for the studio. But then on Saturday nights he would turn it over and just they would put out folding chairs and he would play. And then sometimes if like Elvis Costello was in town or My Morning Jacket was in town, like in New York, they would come up and play with it. So it became this sort of like famous thing. And so I went and a couple times, and it really was like I was sitting in the front row, and like if you like cross your legs at the wrong time, you'll like kick the hi-hat over. Like it's like that intimate, you know. And then, you know, the bands or whatever, everybody sort of adjourns to Levon's kitchen table, and he would like smoke joints and tell just incredible. Like when I was there, he told this story, which I think it ended up in the movie about like the differences between Woodstock and Woodstock '98 or whatever, because he was like, I played both of them, you know.
I would imagine it was the amount of rape at Woodstock '98.
Yeah.
There was like way more rape.
A marked difference.
There was just like a lot more rape at the last Woodstock, and more Limp Bizkit too.
Yeah, and
I don't know if there's a correlation between the two. I can only imagine that when.
During the Offspring set, it was like different than during the Richie Havens.
Exactly. I was going to say that Richie Havens singing Freedom, there's probably not a ton of rape happening in front of him, whereas Limp Bizkit singing Cornhole Your
Right.
Butthole or what. I don't remember what the song was. Chocolate Starfish.
And the hot dog
Up
flavored
your
water.
ass.
Yeah.
There's probably a ton of rape going on during that song.
I think so too.
It's just, it's just the mentality.
Yeah. No, I think it was a different time.
We deal with it every day. We struggle with these things. Anyways, so running out of time here, but I wanted to talk to you real quickly. You and I don't want to, we can't really, I think legally we can't really give too much information away.
Correct.
But I will say, because I think they're advertising it. We got a thing saying that it's happening, but you and I were on a game show.
That's right.
Together.
That's right.
It's called Boom.
Yes. I think we can say that.
I think we can say that, right? We can't really give away. But we can't say what happened on the game show because I think legally they can sue us for like
$1 trillion.
$10 million. I think it's
Each. I think it's $10 million.
I think it's $10 million each
for each occurrence.
For each time we mention what happened on the actual game show. But do you want to talk about that a little bit? I mean, you're a big trivia guy. I mean,
yeah, I will talk about that a little. So yeah, my friend Ryan, who's in my band, who you got to know as well, is a multiple-time Jeopardy champion, trivia sort of czar of Los Angeles.
You guys are big trivia dudes.
We're big trivia dudes. 4-time Los Angeles City trivia champions we are. But none of that could have prepared us for the roller coaster that was our game show experience.
Yeah, and I wish we could talk. I think maybe we'll have to talk about it. We'll have to do like we'll do like a DVD commentary of the game show while we're on there. We'll do the commentary, you and I, sort of like John Milius and Arnold Schwarzenegger for Conan the Barbarian.
Totally.
But as what's his name's Steve? As Steve Perry told our producer Jessica Hunley one time about the band Journey, I'll just say that us being on the game show, it was a journey. So to quote Steve Perry of Journey,
every time I use the word journey in any context now, I'm gonna attribute
it truly
to
was
Steve Perry.
a journey.
It really was.
So I have a treat for you, Stephen, because since you are such a country music fan,
okay, yes,
and you are a trivia nut,
yes,
if you will. And normally we don't always do this, but we've been doing this thing on the show where we have like band names and we have to guess.
Okay.
Yasi hated it when she was on here.
I did see that part of Yassi's episode.
Yeah.
She was not. She
You
thought
saw
it was
it?
or I heard it.
Oh,
whatever.
okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say we
This
deleted
is
the
audio
footage,
only.
so I can't imagine that you would have seen that anywhere. But she was not a big fan of that. Everyone else loved it. I don't know what it was about her, but she didn't like it. So what I'm gonna do here, though, is a little bit different. I'm gonna give you the name of a country musician
Okay.
And I made it not too obscure so that people
Okay.
at home can play along
We'll see.
too.
Okay.
And you're going to give me the state that they were born in.
Oh, this is going to be difficult.
No?
Okay.
That's good. But
Okay.
for a bonus point, and you don't win anything either. Not unlike
State of death?
but for a bonus point, if you can name the town that they're from and the state. So do your best.
Whew, okay.
You don't lose anything either.
Okay, yeah.
You
no.
get to go back to easy sound after this. There's nothing.
Right.
I'm not taking anything from you. Okay.
Good to know.
All right.
The
First one.
vetiver masters aren't on the line.
That's right. I own the label after the end of this weird country game. So, okay, first off, Waylon Jennings.
Waylon Jennings is from Texas.
You want to get a bonus point for what city?
Waylon Jennings is from, I don't know which city.
Okay, Texas is correct. Willie Nelson.
Willie Nelson is also from Texas, I guess, unless he was not born in Texas.
Correct, he is from Texas.
Okay.
And by the way, Waylon Jennings is from Littlefield, Texas.
Okay.
If you know where that is. I don't.
I don't.
I don't either. What do you want to name where Willie Nelson was from in Texas?
I don't know where he's from in Texas.
Abbott, Texas.
Abbott, Texas. Okay. I think I've heard that.
I'm going to give you a hint. All of these country musicians, unlike a lot of rock musicians and or rap musicians, are from really small towns that you've never heard of.
No, that's for sure.
Which is really interesting. Hank Williams, Sr.
Hank Williams Sr., Alabama.
Wow, that's a good. That's good. Where in? You're 3 for 3. Where do you want to guess for where he was born? I don't even know if this is a city.
Almeria.
Never heard of it. He's from Butler County.
Butler County. Okay.
So I don't even know if they don't even know. Maybe there wasn't even a city back then. Maybe he was just from the county
Route 7
of Butler County.
Yeah,
he was
right.
born in like a field
Yeah.
in Butler County. Immediately started drinking.
Right.
He died at 27. No.
He's a 27 clubber for
That's
sure.
right.
On
Kurt
New Year's Day.
Wow. Kurt Cobain and Hank Williams. How about this, though? You mentioned him earlier. We're talking about Bocephus. Hank Williams Jr., where is he born at?
Well, I mean, I would say also Alabama for Hank Williams Jr., but unless he randomly wasn't born there. He identifies as an Alabaman.
Right. He's actually from Louisiana.
Okay.
Close enough. Shreveport, Louisiana.
Okay.
So we're not
He
going to...
must have been born during a Louisiana hayride episode. I think that was what's happened there.
It's quite possible. They could have been down in Bossier City gambling, and maybe Hank Williams Sr. lost a bet.
Popped out a kid.
And he was forced to make love to a woman
Yeah.
with sunglasses on
Miss Audrey.
and a black hat. Okay, so, here we go. You don't get a point for that. So you're 3 out of 4, though. That's pretty good. That's better than our producer, Jessica Hunley, did this morning over breakfast, and myself. Merle Haggard.
Merle Haggard is from Tulare, California.
Tulare, California. Now, I'm going to give you 2 points on that because when I looked it up, it said he's from Oildale, California.
I think that's true. Oildale. It's Kern County, Oildale, Tulare. The reason I said Tulare is because there's like a tribute album called Tulare Dust, but I think Oildale is actually, and he was born in like a converted boxcar. Like that they made into like a shotgun home.
That sounds horrifying.
Yeah, but Oildale is actually correct. So I'll just take the 1 point.
No. You're going to get 2 for that because no one else would even come up with Tulare, nor would they know that he was born in a converted boxcar. I would have guessed Bakersfield just because that's sort of the thing that I associate with him, and that's just what would come to mind. How about this guy, Webb Pierce?
Webb Pierce is, I want to say, I don't know, but I'm going to say Mississippi.
Nope. He's Louisiana's own. West Monroe, Louisiana.
Okay.
I think he's actually near where that's near where my parents live, and that's where the Louisiana Country Music Hall of Fame is. Not by chance, probably because of Webb Pierce, as he's pretty much the only guy down there. But also that's where those duck call people are from. I think.
The dynasty.
The Duck Dynasty.
Yeah.
So same county. Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash is. This is weird. See, because I'm weirdly not that as into Johnny Cash as most people are, but I'm going to say Tennessee.
Well, the reason why you're not that into Johnny Cash, well, most people that like Johnny Cash are not necessarily country music fans. Johnny Cash is like Bob Marley.
Right.
You know, and
Well,
because they both lived in Jamaica, that's why.
Well, that's
the only
Keith
reason
Richards
why.
and- yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, that's the same thing. It's like people that your mom has the Bob Marley Legend CD
And
the Johnny Cash Def Jam recordings.
Hurt.
Yeah, I love that Hurt song.
Yeah.
It's my favorite song by Johnny Cash and Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's from Arkansas. So I'm not going to give you a point there because you should know that one.
I definitely should.
How about his wife, June Carter Cash? Where is she from?
So June Carter Cash of the Carter family lineage.
So this is a real country music fan talking right now.
I'm going to say that they are. So, okay. The Carter family are either from Virginia or Tennessee. And the reason why, so the dawn of country music in 1927, Ralph Peer records the Carter family and Jimmy Rogers on like a field recording expedition. Those are the famous Bristol 27 recordings. And I don't know from where the Carter family came to that thing. I'm going to say Virginia.
Correct. Virginia it is. And I'm going to give you a bonus point for giving that whole speech about it because that's real country music knowledge right there to know that they were 1927 field and all that good stuff. Okay, how about this one? Rita Coolidge. 70 years young.
Yeah, Chris and Rita, I have no idea. I'm going to say Mississippi.
Tennessee.
Okay.
0 on that one. How about this guy? Charlie Pride. Our first African American in this country music trivia.
And I have no idea. I'm going to say Kentucky for Charlie Pride.
Nope. Charlie Pride is from Mississippi.
Oh, man, I've gone Mississippi twice. And the reason I do that is because there's a shocking number of people that are from Mississippi. They have a whole trail. They have the country music trail where you get like a marker, like a historical marker, and there are enough of them for it to be like a thing. So that's why I've just been guessing Mississippi when I don't know, except for Charlie Pride.
Well, that's the thing, too. And he's from Sledge, Mississippi. I mean, in some of these towns, so Rita Coolidge, we forgot to mention, Lafayette, Tennessee. June Carter, Hilton's, Virginia. And Johnny Cash, Kingsland, Arkansas.
Marty Stewart is from Philadelphia, Mississippi.
Marty Stewart is not on this list. But that's it. It's crazy, though. I've never even heard of some of these places, you know. How about this guy, Chris Christopherson? You know him as Cisco Pike.
I know him as Cisco Pike and as a scholar, as a Rhodes Scholar.
That's right. He landed a helicopter on Johnny Cash's lawn.
That's to deliver the demo tape. He currently resides in Hawaii.
That's true.
But I don't know.
He choked me one time in Santa Barbara because I told him I was trying to leave the show because I needed to go to In-N-Out. And he choked me.
I don't know, so I'm just gonna say he might. I don't know. I'm gonna say Santa Barbara, California, just in honor of that.
No. Come on, where's Chris Christopherson from originally?
Chris Christopherson might be from Georgia.
He's from Texas.
Okay. Oh yes, that's a bad brick on my part.
No, you knew that one.
I did.
So we can't give you this one. All right, Jerry Jeff Walker.
Jerry Jeff Walker is from New York.
Wow, that's great. Where in New York?
Jerry Jeff Walker, I don't know. I'm going to say he's from White Plains.
He's from how do you say it? Oneida?
Oneida?
Well,
Jerry Jeff Walker's first album. So Jerry Jeff Walker is in a psychedelic band from San Francisco called Circus Maximus.
That's correct.
That was on Vanguard.
Mm-hmm.
And then he later recorded Driftin' Way of Life, which is a total just like Dylan, like early Dylan kind of aping record on Vanguard, which is incredible as like a New York sort of like Greenwich Village folky. And then he was like, wait a minute. I'm going to go to Texas and be like king of the rednecks. And then he did that.
Goodbye, Terralingua.
Yeah, Viva Terralingua.
Viva Terralingua. That's what it is.
Yeah.
One time we were down in Marfa, Texas, and we met these two guys. One guy was named Marfa Mike, and the other guy's name was, I think it was Black Steve, but he was a white guy. We were at a party, and the cops showed up, and they arrested Marfa Mike. And as they were hauling him out to the cop car, and he was spitting and cussing, kicking up dirt. And we asked Black Steve, hey, what happened to Marfa Mike? And he said, hell, must have been that chili cook-off down in Terralingua. Which I can only imagine what
what went down.
He just ate some chili and went fucking ape shit.
Well, you know that. So Billy Joe Shaver recently was in the news a couple years ago because he shot somebody in a bar fight.
That's right.
And so when the trial came up, speaking of country music legends, I don't know if he's on the list.
He's not on the list because I knew you would know he was in Texas.
Mississippian Jimmy Rogers. So when Billy Joe Shaver was on the stand, they say, "Is it not true, Mr. Shaver, that you shot this man because he was going after your woman?" And Billy Joe Shaver, under oath, said, "Jack, I can get more women than a passenger train can haul," which is quoting Jimmy Rogers as his response to the prosecutor.
Is that a yes, Mr. Shaver? You're under oath. That's funny. Okay, so this was taking it back to Waylon. Jessie Coulter, who was married to Waylon Jennings, where is she from? And this was an interesting one to me to find out because it made a lot of sense when I read the Waylon biography.
This I don't know either, but so I'm just going to say.
I'm going to give you a hint.
Okay, yeah.
Where Waylon kind of got his start as a solo artist before he moved to Nashville.
Okay, I mean, he was a cricket.
He played with Buddy Holly.
Right.
He was in Lubbock.
Right.
He started playing with Buddy Holly. Then Buddy Holly famously dies.
Yeah. Gets
Sorry.
on the plane.
Gets on the plane.
Right.
And Waylon had his seat. You know that
yeah,
story.
Oh, yeah.
And he told Buddy Holly, he said, "I hope this plane fucking crashes with you in it," and then gave up his seat. And then the plane crashed, and that fucked Waylon up forever. Because they were like best buddies, and Buddy Holly had given him his start and brought him out to New York and all this shit. So Waylon, after he's in the Crickets, he goes to this city to become a solo artist, learn his chops there, playing every night. What city is that? And that's where Jessie Coulter's from.
I mean, I'm just going to say, I don't know. I'm going to say Tennessee. I'm going to say, no.
Phoenix, Arizona.
Phoenix, Arizona.
That's where Waylon got
Oh,
his
right,
start.
because his first, this was like a record store day thing. They did his, Phoenix, radio recordings thing that dude, Jason, who writes for Aquarium Drunkard, helped put out. So
exactly. He was on the radio. Yeah. He was, doing a podcast, I think, in Phoenix, Arizona. Waylon Jennings.
Waylon Banger's Ball.
That's right, Waylon. Exactly. All right, I got this. Okay, this is going to be, this one, if you get this one's 3 points. Okay. And we're almost done here. We're wrapping up here on Jedbanger's Ball. Jack Reno, and the trick is that his name is Reno.
Jack Reno of Reno and Smiley fame. I'm gonna say North Carolina.
He's from Bloomfield, Iowa, and the fact that you even know who Jack Reno is, I'm gonna give you 1 point for that. Now here's another tough one. This guy just passed away. It's sad. I saw him play here a couple years ago. Little guy. Little Jimmy Dickens.
Little Jimmy Dickens.
The famous Grand Ole Opry.
Grand Ole Opry star, Little Jimmy Dickens. I'm gonna say Georgia, just because nobody's been from Georgia yet.
Little Jimmy Dickens is from Bolt, West Virginia.
Oh, awesome. There's not been any West Virginians either.
So we're not going to count that one either. And now, finally, last but not least, probably one of my favorite guys of all time, probably a fashion icon, if you will. The inventor, probably the first guy to play the wah-wah pedal, or as he called it, the womper stomper. Just one of my favorite singers and songwriters of all time. Polk Salad Annie, big hit for.
I know where we're headed here, but I don't know if I know where he's from. But
Tony Joe White.
I think that Tony Joe White is from Oklahoma.
Oh, Steven. Oh, Steven.
I knew Tony. I should have studied Tony Joe.
Come on,
White.
Tony Joe Steven. Polk Salad Annie.
Polk Salad Annie. In the lyric he talked.
Gators got your granny.
Right. So is he in Florida?
No. Florida? No.
There are gators in Florida.
I know. He's from Louisiana.
He's from Louisiana. Yeah, I mean
Oak Grove, Louisiana, right on
all swampy.
Right on the border of Arkansas.
I do love the Tony Joe White. I like the first two records and the disco record.
The disco record is great. I love that cocaine country, as they call it. If you don't know Tony Joe White, go out there and look up. Even trolls love rock and roll because it's a good song for all ages. It's about trolls. It's about rock and roll.
And there's a twofer of the first two records, which is incredible.
All right, we're going to count it up here real quick. We got 3, 5, 7. You got a lot of bonus. The ones you got right, you got bonus points on. 8, 9 points.
All right. I'm sorry about Tony Joe White.
I don't know how many. 9 out of what. Doesn't matter. You won, though.
Yeah, I win this.
I say you win.
Brought to you by Fiji Water.
That's right. This is not brought to you by Fiji Water. That's not. Thanks for being on the show, Steven.
Thanks for having me.
All right, I'll see you back at work.
All right.
right, that was Stephen Brower on Jedbanger's Ball. Thanks again for listening. As always, we're brought to you by This Is Not a Pipe, recorded here at Green Street, beautiful Los Angeles, California. If you want to learn more about Stephen Brower or his record company or the Fruit Bats or Vetiver, go to Easy Sound Records. It's easysound.co. There's no M on the end of that. My producers, as always, Jessica Hunley, Nicholas Fahey. Thanks for listening to The Ball. I'll see you next time.